Well, welcome. I am so glad you have decided to take time out of what is no doubt a busy schedule to join us here today. I find we get so caught up in the to-do of life that sometimes we don't just slow down and allow ourselves the luxury of listening in on something that maybe will move us to the next level in our life. And I hope today is that for you. We have the pleasure today of talking to Suzanne Smith, and we're going to be talking about negotiating change, why influence matters more than power. So you can see why I wanted Suzanne here. It is very on brand with the art of feminine negotiation. And today we're going to be uncovering how we can stop forcing change and start inviting it, which I'm excited about. So welcome, Suzanne. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I always joke with my students, I'm like, yes, we're human beings, not human doers. And so I
Yeah.
love how you set this up.
I love that. I can't believe I have not heard that before. That is so clever. And for those of you who may not know her, Suzanne Smith is a community strategist, a professor, a TEDx speaker, and she has spent decades working at that intersection, that sweet spot of business, government, and social impact. And as a longtime social justice lawyer, that social impact also caught my eye. There's so many aspects of what Suzanne does that I'm like, I've got to get her on this show. She's got that rare ability to translate what are really complex social issues into
Mhm.
clear, practical insights that help people understand not just what's going wrong, but what actually works. And my goodness, in today's polarized world, we certainly need that more than ever. She's the founder of Social Impact Architects. She's advised leaders across education, healthcare, poverty, workforce development, you name it. And she's known for straight talk, which those of you who know me know that's something I love. Storytelling, also a passion of mine, and a deep belief that real change doesn't come from force, but comes from alignment. So, again, very on brand. And I'm looking forward to this conversation about emotional intelligence and influence and what it truly means to negotiate change in the world.
Mhm.
So, Suzanne, you spent a lot of time helping people make sense of, what's really happening behind the headlines. And good knows we've got some
Mhm.
very alarming headlines that have been
We
happening
do.
around the world. And so, when you look at the world right now, what do you think, what would you say that most people are misunderstanding about social change?
I love this question because I do think that, 2026 started off with a bang. And so there was a lot of stuff going on in the world. And I think it's really easy. And I've launched my class this spring semester. It's really easy for students and for people watching the headlines to say, it's the worst it's ever been,
Yeah.
and get overwhelmed. That cognitive overload sets in. And so part of what I try to do is, one, remind people we have been here before. If you're a student of history like I am,
Yeah.
we've been here through these changes before. Because I am a social change kind of historian and teacher, in my lifetime, I've seen changes. So the thing I always remind people of, particularly if they're younger, is when I was in a car growing up, very early on, there were no seatbelts, and there was a thing called drunk driving, and it was a big deal.
Yeah.
We had the AIDS epidemic. We had a number of things that we have, to a large degree, figured out as a society. And this is just the new bump of things that we need to figure out, whether you choose climate change or you talk about social justice or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
And they don't happen instantly because we live in a democracy and everybody's opinion matters. And
Yeah.
so we've got to kind of socialize these things and try to get them to a good place. So I
Nice.
always remind people of that. I also remind people that they can be part of that change. And so to not take a back seat, but to take a front seat in their change making in their community, and that every little part of what they do is so important, which is why I encourage both professional change makers, so people who run nonprofits
Yeah.
and social businesses, but I also encourage the everyday change maker who has their everyday job, but they want to do a difference in the world. The lawyer, the welder, the person who's doing oil changes, whatever it is, they can do things to make a difference in their own world. And I think that in and of itself kind of gives people like oxygen around the issues that, one, we've been here before, but two, there are things they can do that makes a difference. And it gives them agency where they're not feeling kind of constrained by or suffocated by the headlines.
And that's such an important message. And I think people are in such a state of overwhelm,
Yeah.
now in particular in ways that I haven't seen in a long time. Recognizing that you don't have to have life happen to you, right? And you don't have to shut down. You can engage, step forward. Your voice matters, and who you choose to be and what you choose to do matters. So make it matter. And I know, Suzanne,
Well,
I often challenge the idea that change only happens through like big institutions or powerful players.
yeah,
So tied to what we're just talking about, I wonder if you can
yes.
speak to that. Like, where do everyday people actually have more influence than they realize?
I love this question because it's most of what we connect with and is affecting our everyday lives actually happens at a local level. And that's where change is the easiest for us to intersect. And it is also an opportunity for us to interject.
Yeah.
And so we talk about just everyday change making. And I use this strategy of the 4 T's. So time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And so let's talk about it at a local level. You certainly should be paying attention to national and state headlines, but at a local level, you can make a big difference. So time. So lots of people don't feel like they have time, but oftentimes they are the small things that make a difference. So even in society, just smiling at people when you go past them in the sidewalk, doing returning your grocery cart doesn't take extra time, but it is being a good citizen is what we call it.
Yeah.
And that's really important. If you have extra time, you can also think about things that are in your community that you want to make a difference in. So for example, when my husband and I go out for a walk, we pick up trash along the way.
Nice.
And that's something where we are providing a benefit to the people who are also enjoying that beautiful walking trail. And as you know, environmentally, it also means that stuff doesn't get in the waterways and doesn't potentially get choked on by animals and all these other things that have the added benefit.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's time. You obviously can ratchet up and you can mentor in your local school. You can, do things if you have more time, serve as on a board of a local nonprofit. Then you have talent. We all have talents. So it can be like for myself, I love baking, but I don't want to keep
cool.
baking for my husband and I because I don't need a full cake.
Yeah.
So I actually will bake cupcakes and I give half of them to our neighbor down the street
I
who
love
are
that.
elderly and they don't have the ability to bake.
Yeah.
And he's the caregiver for his wife and he loves getting those cupcakes. He loves getting stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
Sign
just a
me up.
talent that I have that I want to share, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take any extra, and it's meaning that food doesn't go to waste, and he loves it, and he feels like he's taken care of, he and his wife.
That's nice.
And then you could ratchet it up and maybe you have more time. Maybe you're an expert in building a website. You could volunteer for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different talents that you can give to your community. And then treasure, of course, you can donate to a local nonprofit. You can obviously encourage other people to donate during giving days and use your social media to tell people about the giving day. And that small little treasure, so if you just forgo one Starbucks a week, that's just $5
Yeah.
and that accumulates to $20. And just like your Netflix account,
Yeah.
just put that $20 and actually I call it set it and forget it. Choose a nonprofit, give them that $20 every month. I promise you it will go far.
Yeah.
Um, so that's treasure. And then testimony. That's a brand new one for a lot of people. But we need to be using our voices on behalf of the things we care about. And so testimony is making sure you're voting because that is your ultimate voice.
Yeah.
And then, registering to vote, encouraging other people to register to vote, but also going on social media and talking about, the importance of recycling or the importance of whatever it is that you deeply care about. You probably don't even realize how much impact you have on your sphere of influence. Going
Yeah.
back to your point of influence, where if you tell people about something, they're like, wow, you know what? I should pay attention to this thing or that thing. I should sign this petition in my local community. Testimony. I'll give a great example. I had a really good friend of mine who we have a number of four-way stops in our community, but there is one that is not a four-way stop and it throws people off who are from
Yeah.
not from the community. And there's a whole lot of traffic accidents there. So she actually petitioned through testimony, our local city council member, on the area that was not the actual stop sign to put a little note there to say, this is not a four-way stop. Be
Yeah.
careful. And so they're paying attention to making sure there aren't accidents there, and accidents have gone down as a result. So
That's,
that's what you can do with testimony is you can actually make a difference and save lives,
yeah.
save people from, unintentional harm.
Yeah.
So those are all the things you can do, and they don't require a lot. And you get what we call the helper's high, which is you get to reduce depression, increased connection to the community, increased happiness. And those are just small everyday change making ideas.
And ownership over your life, right? I mean, as well,
Yeah.
where you don't feel like a victim anymore necessarily. You don't feel like life is happening to you because you're taking some agency, and which is can be a very powerful thing. And I was laughing as you were saying about the stop sign thing. It reminded me of that Modern Family episode they had, I think, where Claire went on her big mission to go try and get that four-way stop at that one. Now, tied to what you're just talking about, there's like we hear a lot about sort of burnout and people are feeling at the
Right.
end of their rope. So what are some things that you do to help people move from the doom scrolling kind of mindset to
Yeah.
into that meaningful action without burning out?
I love that you brought up the doom scrolling thing because I do think that going back to what you talked about, we are in what's called cognitive overload, and it is not just because of all the bad news we're getting; it's just the noise.
Yeah.
So if you look at the research, before social media kind of proliferated, would get anywhere from 3 to 5,000 messages a day. Now there's some people saying we have 10 to 15,000 messages a day. Well, probably no surprise to you, in 10 years, we haven't evolved that much as human beings to deal with that level of noise. So, what I recommend to my students, I recommend to anybody, is just turning down the volume on the noise that you are consuming. And so, being really careful with and Jonathan Haidt's work is so great with this. So, I would encourage anybody to read his Atlantic article called Why America's Become Uniquely Stupid. He also had a follow up book on that
Okay.
basically talks about the notifications you get on your phone and how that's kind of has an effect on you and has an effect that is, in my opinion, negative.
Yeah.
And it actually just turning off your notifications makes a big difference. Um, I also think that one of the things I encourage people to pay attention to is when they consume their news. So I don't actually consume news after 8 p.m. because I find it enters my dreams and I don't sleep as well that night. And so all of those things, to your point, contribute to burnout because we feel burnout is connected to cognitive overload.
Yeah.
And it also is connected to our sphere of influence. So
Yeah.
they did a really great research study in ERs. And of course, I can't think of anybody. By the way, I love the show The Pit. Noah Wiley, you're a genius.
Yeah.
Love that show. But in ER doctors, there's probably nobody who hits burnout more because the
Yeah.
stuff they see is terrible.
Absolutely.
And they actually did a study of ERs that are, a placebo effect, but then they had an ER where they created social constructs where people connected with each other. They brought birthday cakes for each other. They were supportive of each other, supporting self care, meditation. And those ER doctors and nurses did not hit burnout the same way the placebo did.
Wow.
So what it shows is no matter how difficult your job is, you're a firefighter,
Oh,
you're, an ER doctor, whatever, it's connected to your social construct just as much as it is your job itself.
yeah.
And so what we do and who we surround ourselves with is also really important. So you want to unplug from people who I call energy vampires,
Yeah.
people who suck your energy out with their negativity. And it could be your phone, it could be the news, it could be other people. And so just be careful about all those things. And it's not only your workplace's responsibility, but what I encourage people to do is take control of their own responsibility associated with burnout because it's equally your personal responsibility to not hit burnout.
Yeah. Wow, that is, and it's amazing. For our listeners, I want you to think about what we've just heard from Suzanne. Like these are simple things, right? Simple things that you can do that will, supersize the impact in your life. Something as simple as when you said notifications, I thought, oh my gosh, I can so resonate with that. There's something almost, it becomes a nervous twitch, right? Without even realizing it. When we've got this constant
Yes,
dinging, pulling our attention away from whatever we're in the moment. And I see it with my kids. We're watching a show together as a family and something dings on the phone and their attention's pulled away. So
it's
really
true.
simple life-changing events. And speaking about supersized impact, like you've talked to us and given some fabulous examples about how these small actions, right, can have
Mhm.
ripple effects. Can you maybe share an example of a seemingly ordinary decision that ends up having an outsized impact, a supersized impact?
I love that one. Supersize impact. I'm going to use that one. I love this. I want to give this story not just of an everyday person, but somebody who owns a business. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs like myself out there who think, it's those corporations who can do, corporate social responsibility. They can give back to the world.
Yeah.
But truly, even just a small business can make a choice around giving back. And so I was giving a presentation a couple of years ago at one of the universities where I work as a professor, and there was a guy who owned a couple of franchises of oil change places. And in the business world, oil changes are commodities. Like you go based on how quick they are, how cheap they are. Like an oil change is an oil change. I'm sure
Yeah.
he would say that's not true, but in my mind, as a customer, an oil change is an oil change. And he came up to me and he's like, "Well, I don't know what I can do." And I said, "Okay, go talk to your employees, empower them to say, how can we give back in this next year?" So of course there was an employee who raised their hand, again, going back to importance of employee agency, and said, "Well, down the street, we have a local after school program." And so they went to the leader of that after school program. Well, of course, that after school program has a van who needs free oil changes.
Right.
So they started doing free oil changes for the after school program. And they liked it so much. The owner actually went to all of his other friends and they got free breaks, they got free gas. I mean,
Wow.
basically, this van is like, doesn't cost the after school program anything. They
Yeah.
loved it so much. They actually did a roundup campaign during Giving Day and allowed customers to round up, and they took pictures with the after school program. So now on their wall, instead of, uh, advertisements for oil changes, they have cute pictures of kids and after
Oh,
school program stuff. And then, oh, this is the one I love the most. They actually taught the kids auto mechanics, how to change their
I
oil
was
change,
wondering
how to
if that
check the
was coming. I was,
tires. I was so flabbergasted when he followed up with me. I was like, "Oh, you have gone all in." He goes, "No, it's my employees. They're the ones doing it." He's now hired one of the 16-year-olds to come work there over the summer because he's very interested in auto mechanics, and interested in cars. And what young boy is not interested
yeah,
in cars?
yeah.
And then he actually now is serving on the board of that nonprofit. And I'm like,
Yeah. And
this
talk
is
about the
awesome.
gift that keeps on giving, though, right? I mean, both to that specific sort of after school program, to the kids who are getting the benefit of it. I bet the morale in his workplace is improved exponentially, and then all the ripple effects that come from that. It's just,
Well, and here's the clincher, and you picked up on it. Like all those things happen. The cherry on top of the sundae is he thinks it's actually increased revenue for him,
I bet.
because now people who get a choice to make an oil change, myself included, will say, "You know what? I remember what these people are doing, and I want to go support this organization
Absolutely.
versus this organization."
Yeah.
And this is just a small business, and think of the difference they're making in the lives of those individuals. And to your point, his employee morale is better, he's got
Yeah.
better retention, he's connecting with customers, he now has something to talk to customers about when they come in. People are sitting there for their oil change, so they learn about the after school program. He thinks
Yeah.
it's led to them donating to the program.
Yeah.
So it's just this really great pay it forward
Absolutely.
opportunity that has reaped dividends for him in so many ways.
And I think we often forget about the ripple effect, right? Like even so
Mhm.
that changes the life of those kids who come home in a
Yep.
different state, who then pass that on because they show up in a better place for their parents who may have had the
Mhm.
crappiest day, and the ripple effect just keeps growing. So like tied to that, or sort of tied to that, like emotional intelligence, right? I know that comes up a lot in your work, and I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how EQ changes the way people, build trust, because it tied like that guy with the oil change business, he was building trust within the community, right? It was influencing outcomes and but how it navigates tough conversations, what role EQ plays.
Absolutely. Well, and it also ties back to managing yourself and self regulation around your notifications, who you expose yourself to. Well, let's break down emotional intelligence, because I do think that's one of the big myths, is that people think emotional intelligence is really just about being nice,
Yeah.
like just be a nice person.
Yeah.
Well, it is so much more than that, as you know. And so when I teach it in my class, I talk about kind of the quadrants. You've got self awareness, and that's, how well do you know yourself? How well do you know what triggers you? And then you've got self regulation, which we just talked about. So, when do you use your phone? Do you put it down? I put my phone in my purse when I'm at dinner, not on the table. So, I'm not, unintentionally connected to,
Yes.
I call it my electronic leash.
Yeah.
And then there's social awareness, which this, oil change business obviously is very socially aware of what's going on. And then social influence, like the way in which you kind of leverage kind of social change and try to move people. So that person who put up the sign to figure out how they were going to do that four-way stop, that's a person that is influencing from a social perspective, and using their influence in that way. So that's all the different elements of kind of what is emotional intelligence. So going back to your point, all of the things we've talked about have an element of that, so how well do you know yourself?
Yeah.
And then we're a constant work in progress, so you know yourself a little bit better. And this is why, unlike IQ, which we talk about a lot,
Yeah.
EQ or EI is a muscle. IQ is fixed,
Yeah.
EQ, EI is a muscle. And this is one of the reasons why you hear workplaces talking about it. But it's so funny. Anytime I train a workplace, I just did trained a bunch of lawyers about emotional intelligence. And a number of them will always kick back to me, well, I use this with my husband or wife or partner, and it worked with them too. And I'm like, I know,
Yeah.
because it works with everything, your teenagers, everybody. You just get along with these people better. You're building trust, you're building rapport. And so self-awareness is big. Then self-regulation, just knowing where you are. One of the things we talk to lawyers about and others, which I think is so important, is just taking that pause and not reacting.
Yeah.
So when someone sends you an email you don't really like, do you email back immediately, or do what I do, which is hold that email for a day and then say, should I really send that email
Yeah.
or text the way I'm thinking I should? And usually, you change the text or the email because you think better. You're not in that emotional hot state
So true.
anymore.
And
And
I'm
then
glad you
social
mentioned
awareness.
lawyer. Yeah, and sorry, just say, I want you to pick that up where you were, but just I want to put a pin in that for lawyers and for other professions like that for our listeners, but in particular for lawyers, because I can speak to that. We are so conditioned to be reactive, right? Everything in the moment, and we do not filter, and we do it to our detriment for ourselves in our personal lives. We
Yes.
do it in how we show up in the business. We end up making deals go sideways that were right there if we just showed up with a little more EI. So sorry, I just had to, couldn't let that go.
No, well, let's drill down on that, because to me, the most powerful negotiators aren't loud, they're self-regulated.
Yes.
So they stay grounded under pressure. They read the room, which is social awareness. So to me, social awareness is kind of like that. When you walk into a room, how does it feel?
Yeah.
And most people are like, oh, I can't feel anything. And I'm like, you actually do. Next time you walk into a room, kind of say, do they feel happy? Do they feel sad? My favorite one is with my students, fast food places. As soon as you walk in, you can tell, do they like their job? Do they not like their job? How does it feel? Like most people, if they just start tuning into that frequency of the room and realize they can do it, they realize it is part of who they are. They're just not paying attention to it. So reading the room, and then as you know, the best negotiation tool is silence.
Yeah.
Letting the other person talk, because they'll start having discomfort.
Yeah.
Um, and then setting boundaries. It's all about kind of, here's what, setting that boundary. And so social awareness is really just about reading the room, and so you need that in negotiation. And then social influence is the final one, and that really gets down to kind of what I like to call Jedi mind tricks. Like, I love Star Wars, and I think Jedis do a really good job of this, where they're self-aware, they're really good at self-regulation, they're really good at social awareness, and then they use all of that. They channel all of those tools into, like, now what do I want to accomplish, and how do I move a room?
Yeah.
Not just read it, but move a room. And in negotiation, lawyers have to do that all the time, whether it's a jury box, it's a judge, it's the other counsel. And so you're using elements of trust and personality and executive presence and all these things to create a narrative that is so directly connected to what you want that it then just happens.
Yeah.
And it becomes the narrative of the room. And so that's a really special skill set, but it can be cultivated. People think it's only Martin Luther King who can do it, or
Yeah.
these, amazing lawyers, but anybody can cultivate that if they want to.
Well, I love that you started that saying about this is learned, right? We can practice this. We
Yep.
can get intentional about, intentional has become one of my favorite words because we don't live our lives very intentionally, I find. I don't know if that it's, just even being intentional about who do I want to show up as today? Who do I want to show up as in this particular conversation? There was so much in what you just said that I could go in a million directions, but I really want to put a pin for our listeners as well in this idea about like quiet. We have become a very extrovert driven society, and our media influences reinforce that. We've gone from the days when we used to always, I'm dating myself here, but the Sunday Disney movies where the good guy always won and your word was your bond.
Yeah.
Now we're rooting for the bad guys or the protagonist in most of the popular shows on TVs now. But and I'm, an extrovert, so I get that. But I really had an awareness when I had my daughter. She's an introvert. And I recognize that we don't bring emotional intelligence, we don't read the room, and we talk
Right.
over people who are quieter and more
Right.
thoughtful, and we are losing out on such valuable contributions. So I
Right.
challenge all of you who are listening today to go out into the world, go into the workforce or in your homes, and allow for quiet to just to listen, truly listen, not waiting for your turn to speak, but listening to what they're saying. Use your emotional intelligence as well to feel, as Suzanne was saying, and
And do
read the
you
book
mind if I
quiet.
tricks that I use in facilitation for the introverts in the room?
Go ahead, share it.
Yeah, so this is related to social awareness. We recognize we're not in a room of all extroverts. So a good facilitator, a good leader recognizes that people need to enter the room prepared oftentimes, and there are people who talk to think and then some people who think to talk. And so introverts in particular like to think before they talk. And so one thing I always recommend is sending a pre-read so that that way introverts kind of know what is expected of them, and then sometimes pre-assignments. So I do this with my students. So here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what the expectation is. They then feel less anxiety and they feel like they can then talk.
Nice.
The other thing I do in the room is what I call a post-it note exercise. And so I give people post-it notes, and rather than speaking, I actually say, okay, let's do a brainstorm around X. And you got 5 post-it notes. Put your ideas on these 5 post-it notes. And introverts love that because then they're able to put it on the post-it note. I then accumulate the post-it notes and then show the themes.
Yeah.
And then the extroverts who are in the minority, they don't say anything. Everybody kind of gets to vote in some ways through the post-it notes. And that's one way to kind of control conversation. It's also a way to kind of see where the energy of the room is,
Yeah. Nice.
without the overtaking ability of extroverts who can sometimes control the room.
Yes.
You want that group consensus, you need to do something like a post-it note exercise.
That's a great strategy. I love
Mhm.
that. I love that a lot. And for all of our extroverts who are listening, I really invite you to go out and get the book Quiet. That was an eye opener for me, right? It's
It is a good one.
beautifully written, and I think it was written predominantly for introverts, but I think that us extroverts can learn a lot from it. It'll make you a better listener, a better negotiator in life. It'll allow you to have more influence and to do it in a way that shows up with significantly more emotional intelligence. And speaking of,
Yeah.
one of the things I don't think we've touched on yet is this idea about, I think often, particularly in negotiation terms, and you've mentioned for lawyers in particular, like this idea that emotional intelligence is treated as soft, right? When
Yes.
in big business, that's been the perception for so long. When in reality, it's incredibly strategic, right? So where do you see EQ becoming a real advantage under pressure?
Well, I mean, I think no one, every day we have a new headline on AI. Well, the
Yeah,
reality is robots are never going to learn AI,
yeah,
or emotional intelligence. And so it is the way to combat all the different jobs that are probably going to be more obsolete or, kind of retooled because of AI, because emotional intelligence is embedded in every job that there is. Everything else is going to be automated or can be potentially compartmentalized.
yeah,
And so I think to me, that's why it's a true superpower. And if you look at even people who have high IQ, they have a limit to their ability to achieve things unless they couple it with EI. And then those people who do have IQ as well as EI, they tend to do a whole lot better.
yeah,
In fact, really high Q people
yeah,
don't actually have pretty good EI. There's a kind of an inverse correlation a little bit.
yeah,
And so to me, I would just encourage people to say, it can be your new superpower, and not just in the workplace. There's lots of research around relationships that couples who have EI together do
yeah,
better. Parenting, if you have better EI, you obviously can parent better because you're, kind of being an empath around how your child is feeling, when to push, when to not push. And honestly, I think the other thing that people don't fully appreciate is you can also ask other people how they're feeling.
yeah.
So I'll give you an example that I love the most. So my husband's out flying right now. He's a pilot for Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
And essentially, when the pilots get into the cockpit, they don't ever know their co pilot. They're meeting them for the first time.
Wow.
And so the way they get to know each other really quickly is they just check in and they ask each other, are you in the red? Are you in the yellow? Or are you in the green? Red means I had a terrible night last night. I couldn't sleep. I had an argument with my partner,
Yeah,
whatever it is. I'm not feeling well. So my husband always knows, okay, I can't actually rely on them
yeah,
to fly this plane. They're not in a good place. Green means everything's great.
yeah,
Yellow's somewhere in between. So maybe they ate something and they're a little bit off. Their stomach is grumbling a little bit,
yeah,
so that you can kind of rely on something. So my husband and I, even in our own relationship, when we come home from our day, he comes in from flying, I come in from teaching. We just check in,
I like,
and I mean, and you can just guess right now if one of us walks in and we're in the red, guess who the other one is responsible for dinner? So if one of us is in the red, the other person's like, okay, I'll take dinner. Or and then I usually ask him the question. If it's him, I'll say, what would be the most helpful to you? Do you just want me to hold space and us just hang out? Do you actually want help and advice? Or do you just need a hug?
Yeah,
So one of the three H's. And so I think just asking other people how they're feeling
yeah.
shows that you care. So even if you're not good at figuring out where people are as an empath, you can also just ask people, and that's also incredibly meaningful.
And meaningful to the people because we don't often
Yeah,
get invited to do that, right? And and I'm
right.
sure when it happens, and it's obvious it's coming from a place of sincerity and curiosity, right? Bringing that curiosity to the table, it gives them that momentary and immediately builds relationship. I mean, what you're talking about, to me, it's like the ultimate elevator, right? And I mean that in the sense of, it elevates relationships, it elevates outcomes, it elevates influence. And I love the Southwest. Thank you to your husband about that, because and it's fun as you were explaining how he uses it in work. I'm like, oh my God, that would be great in your personal relationships. And then you said you
It
do, which
is.
is so
And
fabulous.
it's so easy. And I recommend even employers do this, like when they do a check-in with their employee, just
Uh,
ask them how they're feeling. I use it in icebreakers. I ask people, tell me your emotion right now, and then connect it to an animal. So, I'm feeling like I'm open and curious like an owl, and they'll talk about that. And some people will come in and say, I'm scattered like a squirrel right now. And I'm like, that's okay. We're gonna unscatter you. They're like,
yeah.
traffic was bad. Just even letting people be vulnerable in that moment.
Yes.
I had one person in one of my classes who said, you know what, I'm distracted because, I may be getting a phone call that I'm not looking forward to. So if I leave, that's the reason. So all of us just knew if that person got distracted, there was a reason.
Yeah.
And of course, as the lecturer, I wasn't someone who was thinking, oh, she's not paying attention because she doesn't care.
Yes.
She's not paying. I didn't create a story for myself. I knew the story. The story was she's
Yeah.
distracted because something important is about to happen, and that's
Yeah.
okay. So also allowing people to share emotions allows us to not guess what the other person
Yeah.
is doing, and usually guess in the negative. We don't always guess in the
Yeah.
positive and give
Oh,
people grace.
the stats on that are terrible. I think what it was like
I
something,
know.
a staggering number where we are wrong about our assessments
Yeah.
and our judgments about people, like 90% of the time or some ridiculous number. It was crazy. And the other thing I love about what you're just saying, and for our listeners, it opens a space for compassion, right? It allows,
Yep.
like that student who said, I'm distracted and I'm expecting this phone call, that then opens the relationship for other students to show up with that empathy and support and build that relationship and trust. And speaking
Well,
of
and speaking
students,
of
oh, go ahead.
distracted, my animal just showed up because obviously she loves it when I'm talking, and she
Yeah.
knows the exact right time to jump up on the desk,
I missed her.
clearly.
Show her again. I'm
Um,
gonna to try and get her up
so
there.
yes, she loves actually, coming into the classroom, and particularly when I talk about distraction, she always is there. So I'll see if she'll come over just a bit and say hi. But this is
Oh,
Lucy,
what a
and
cutie.
she thinks that she should be part of every podcast no matter what. Doesn't matter how much food I give her. She jumped up just at the right time around distraction.
She
So
totally did. I mean, at least she's a manageable size. We got like a 120-pound German Shepherd who will
I
periodically
know.
squeeze up on the couch beside me, and you just see this big nose and sort of popping in. Now, when we were talking about
Yes,
your students, I want to touch on, I can't believe how quick our time is going. I'm glad you talk quickly like me. We're covering so much ground. Younger generations, right? We've got this
yes,
gap where the older generation is always talking about the damn millennials and whatever. So
I know.
what excites you about how, Gen Z and millennials are reshaping, impact or even the philanthropy as we were talking about earlier?
I love that you're asking me this question because I am the absolute opposite. I'm in the minority. I consider my students who are millennials and mostly Gen Z now as like my fountain of youth. Like they keep me young, they keep me
Yeah.
excited. I think the thing I would say to baby boomers and even Gen Xers, if we talk about this, is they grew up in a different time. They have different values. We had different values. We grew up in a different time. And they also are dealing with issues that we dealt with. And so I just remind them when you were in your 20s, remember what was important to you.
Yeah.
It's easy how we get amnesia around like how we were in our 20s. Like we didn't have all the world figured out either.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of money. And so when it comes to giving, I think you see a lot of the big trends, that you're seeing nationally around the workforce, which is the first time all four generations have been in the workforce together, because we've got more and more baby boomers staying longer, and we've got Gen Z coming in, and they could be more different from each other. But in my opinion, there's really a lot to learn from each other. So how can we get kind of reverse mentorship? So how can baby boomers teach emotional
Oh,
intelligence?
yeah.
Because they're obviously really good team players. They're very good at that in-person conversation. And then how can we get, Gen Z to spend time talking about why technology is so
Yeah.
important and how it can save your time, save time being more productive with AI and chat GPT.
Yeah.
So rather than, speaking negatively about each other. So Gen Z will call them boomers, and boomers will be like, oh, they're so distracted.
Yeah.
Again, this goes to emotional intelligence, like help understand why they are that way and just be curious and kind of ask questions and learn from each other. And from a giving perspective, what I recommend to nonprofits, and I've got a blog on this that if people are interested, they could check out, that we did back in June, is that baby boomers, as you can just expect, they love to send that checkbook philanthropy. So they have the nonprofits that they love, and they will send checks on a regular basis. Gen Z, they're like, check? What check? Like, I don't know what a check is. So they're the QR code generation. This is where I recommend all nonprofits allow people to submit via check,
Yeah.
but also put a QR code on your letter, because otherwise you will not get a reply, even
Yeah.
from someone like me, who it's just easier for me to snap a picture off the QR code than sit down and write a check,
Yeah.
as a Gen Xer. And so I think it is changing. The thing I will say about Gen Z is they're volunteering in drove. Their generation, before they will write a check, although they don't write a check, before they do the QR code, wants to volunteer for the nonprofit too, before they actually give their money.
Nice.
They want to actually see the mission in action, which I really appreciate, trust but verify, right?
Yeah. That's
And
encouraging.
so it does encourage me that they want to volunteer. And then once they volunteer, they'll write their check, or they'll volunteer more, and they'll do testimony. They'll go talk about this particular nonprofit. So then they're all in, which I very much appreciate too, is they are going to give every aspect of who they are, their time,
Yeah.
talent, treasure, testimony. So I give huge accolades to Gen Z and millennials. I think they are going to transform the social sector, and much more socially aware than my generation, Gen X, to started with. And I think they're going to require more companies to be socially responsible, because they won't be customers of companies who are not. They're going to, as employees,
Yeah.
they're asking the questions. One of the reasons why I do more and more trainings on corporate social responsibility is HR directors are
Yeah.
saying to me, Suzanne, teach me this, because I'm getting it from prospective employees
Yeah.
about what is your company doing in the community. And I don't have answers, and I
Yeah.
need to have answers, because they won't come to my employee
Yeah.
unless come to this company unless I have good answers. I'm like, smart cookies. Like, and really what I tell people is employees, Gen Z as well as millennials, see giving back to the community as a proxy for how I'm going to be treated as an employee.
Yeah.
If you treat the community well, you're going to treat me as an employee really well. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why.
Reverse mentorship. I love that. I don't think I've
Mm.
heard that term before, I'm embarrassed to say. And I think it's so beautiful and so needed today. And what a different world it would be, frankly, if we all saw that, intent again, coming back to intention again, if we all really
Yeah.
intentionally sought to be learning from each generation and passing on. And I wanted to make sure we touched on, like, from a negotiation lens, how do we stop sort of forcing outcomes and start inviting alignment, right? Whether it's in leadership, community work, our personal relationships.
I think it goes back to social influence. You really can't force anybody to do anything. It has to really be their idea. You can't force people to change.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about your ability to, one, set up the idea and the vision. And hopefully, we're moving also away from hierarchical structures where you do this because I told you to, and you're trusting me, to this, you're doing this because you were part of the conversation to start with,
Yeah.
and you were part of the crafting of that vision. And so you're moving away from the top of the organization developing a strategic plan to everybody crafting the strategic plan and seeing themselves in it. And that idea of co creation.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're seeing is the leaders who are more successful are those people who are kind of bringing people into the conversation early and often, asking those feedback loops around how are things going. They're very open, they're very receptive to feedback. And then also they give people very specific ways they can make a difference. And so, here are the 3 ways that you can make a difference, or here's the job description you have, and here's how it specifically, the strategic plan connects to your job description. And so those people who I think are really good at involving other people, directly connecting the mission to what that person's job is, because sometimes it's hard to see, and then giving people very specific, tangible things they can do, I think are going to be far more successful. And that's just social influence 101. Like, make it easy, make it pleasurable, make it part of them. Like, it's not hard, but it is so sometimes it can be counterintuitive a little bit.
Well, and what I love about everything you've just said, and again, it's so in alignment with my sort of philosophy. It's seeking intentionally to have power with other people as opposed to exerting
Yes,
power over others, right? It's
correct.
a profound difference in approach. And perspective is such a difference. And I want to actually thank you for sharing that perspective about the millennial and the Gen Zs as well. So often in life, how we react to people or situations, it's all about the perspective we bring to the table. So
Right.
be open to experiencing different perspectives. And that's why I love that reverse mentorship so much as well, because
Yeah.
it opens up different perspectives to us to show up differently. So,
Mhm.
well, I can't believe how quickly our time has gone. I would love to have you back sometime. You're just a packed
Yes,
out
please.
information. And I normally love to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life? It doesn't have to be about any of the stuff we've talked about, just one of those kind of aha moments.
Well, I do think it connects back with what we talked about related to social change, emotional intelligence, and it kind of, I think, is a way I guide my life. One is, I think, one of the most important things you can do is have values.
Yeah,
And really, values alignment, I think, is so critical. And so, when you're aligned with your values, it means your head, heart, and gut are aligned.
yeah,
And it is my truth. It helps me guide my life. And so I always really recommend that people, when they choose a job, when they choose where they're volunteering, when they choose their partner, have it aligned with your values.
yes,
And if you do that, myself included, I don't have a job. I have a calling,
yeah,
because it's aligned with my values. I don't feel like I work for a living. Same thing with my husband and my partnership and my relationships. I have values aligned relationships.
yeah,
So that's always the best piece of advice I give people is know your values and also know they're going to change over time. Always kind of reconnect with like, is this the same value that I have? Because your life changes and sometimes your values change over time or they crystallize in different ways.
yeah.
So that's my best piece of advice.
Well, and what a powerful note to end on as well. Okay, I think in today's sort of busy world where people are
Mhm.
do let themselves get in a state of overwhelm, I don't know that many people even question what their values are, or where if you ask them what their value system is and what was really the most important to them and what values they wanted to show up as. So what a beautiful message. And so where can people learn about you, Suzanne, to learn more about you and what you do and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So all the stuff we talked about, whether it's coming up with your values, we've got DIY tools on that, to everyday change making, to professional change making is on my website, socialimpactarchitects.com. I also have a personal website called meetsuzanne.com. You can also follow me. We've got the top Substack on social change, Social Trend Spotter. So you can follow Substack. And then, of course, social media. As always, so we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, soon to be on TikTok as well.
Awesome. And for our listeners, if you're multitasking right now or if you're driving and listening, don't worry, we will make sure to put those in the show notes so that you can take advantage to reach out and access some of those resources. And when people have resources available, I always tell you, there isn't much free in this world as well. Go take advantage of those resources that are available. And Suzanne, I can't thank you enough. I love the conversation. I think we covered so much ground. You just brought so much value to the conversation. So thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. You're bringing positivity in this world and an opportunity for people to take agency in their life. And what better could they be doing to turn into a human being versus a human doer?
Love that. Thank you. And right back at you. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us again. And if this conversation reminded you that negotiation isn't about control, but about connection, about curiosity and choosing how you show up, then take that insight with you into the conversations that matter the most this week. Don't just listen to these things and let it pass on. Try and live into it. And if this episode really ignited something in you, please hit subscribe if you haven't done that already and share. Give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people. There is so much value here, all kinds of gold nuggets dropping from the ceiling. And when we do that, when we share, we can grow this movement together. And if you're done playing small and you're ready to claim bigger outcomes in every area of your life, feel free to meet me at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Check out my book of the same name, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And let's unleash that power that you've had all along and maybe you have not been tapping into. And remember, every moment is a negotiation. So negotiate like the force of nature that you are and lead with heart, lead with purpose, and rewrite the rules that were handed to you. So until next time, take care.